All right, well, I will officially call the meeting to order and thank everyone for joining us at our village board meeting tonight. The first item on the agenda is kind of a nice one. It's acknowledging and celebrating Eagle Scout Ben Talty and his project that greatly improved the Irvington Woods. So I think we have Joe Archino. I believe we have the Eagle Scout himself, and as well as Ben's parents, perhaps.
Yeah, just give me
Join
a
us
second.
on Zoom here.
And,
There's Ben.
hold on a second. Tough because people jump around on my little list here. So just give me a second.
See Joe, that's good.
All right, and Joe, you're on. If there's others that expect to be on, just raise your hand.
Hi, how's it going? I'm here. I'm the Eagle Scout.
Yeah, there you are. Okay, give me a second to get the rest of the people onto the panel here. I know there was a bit of a list here, so.
Okay, that's good.
Okay.
We're here.
Okay, there you are.
Sorry,
No worries.
we're Ben's
Right.
parents.
Excellent.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, everyone.
Joe, are you able to talk? So I think Joe had a little introduction here, but.
Joe needs to get his son now.
Okay, well, what I can do real quick is we'll have a little show and tell because I do have some pictures taken from. There's Joe. Joe, do you want to do an introduction here, and then
Sure,
I can
I'm
put
happy to.
And 1 second, Joe. It looks like there's someone from a 631 phone number that might want to join in too. They raised their hand. Is that, you guys expecting anyone else, Ben or his parents?
Be Dave Zwibel.
Okay. All right, Joe, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm on my cell phone. I wasn't able to log on my PC. So I'm only seeing a little, but you can hear me obviously. So yeah, it's really nice to be here tonight. Ben and his family and his friends have done an amazing job for the Irvington Woods Committee and the entire department. As always seems to happen lately, when a good thing is going on in the Irvington Woods, a lot of other positive things happen. Ben took on the project of trying to create a new pathway down to the marshlands, which, seemed like a huge task, but not only did he accomplish it, if you go there and you look at the entire area and the improvements that has been made, and new entrance from Mountain Road to the back of the nature center and the back of the outdoor classroom, relocating the deer exclosure, which makes the pathway when you get past the marshlands clearer, an overlook down to the marshlands. It's really just been such a phenomenal addition. The two people that he worked with the most were CJ Riley and Dave Zwibel, and they're really the two who should jump in here and say a few words about Ben. I can't tell if they're with us or not. Are they?
We're here. Yes.
How about Dave and CJ?
I see CJ.
Yep. Here.
CJ, how about you join in now and give a little overview for the board?
Sure. So I first met Ben. Ben, I think we met together along with the rest of the group in September, and Ben had this big idea. So this was my 6th Eagle Scout project since coming on board in 2016 with the Nature Center, and this was a big project. And it's kind of cool when you have a high school senior, in Ben's case, kind of work with all of these different constituents. And Ben's flexibility, his kind of determination, the long-term stamina of kind of planning and kind of being flexible was always on display. And as Joe said, to do these projects, it takes a village. And it was pretty neat to see the help of DPW, Ben's friends at the high school level, both seniors down to freshmen, Mr. Archino, Dave Zweibel, who has infinite knowledge of kind of working with other Eagle Scout projects and Girl Scout projects in the Irvington Woods. It was just an absolute culmination of skill, talent, resources, and enthusiasm. And it's neat because it unlocks this gem that is the Hermit's Wetland into kind of this new area that, going down the outdoor classroom, you now have this really nice kind of threshold, this gateway into kind of this underutilized resource that now for bird watching and now for kind of developing the tree plantings and kind of a new ecosystem, it opens up that avenue. And I'm sure Ben's parents too, it's through these projects you kind of make new friends, and it was a real honor and a real privilege to kind of work with Ben's parents and have them as kind of new friends, along with Ben himself. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Mr. Zweibel.
Dave, you with us?
I actually
see him now in the
Dave
audience, yeah.
as a participant as well. We can,
Okay, hold on. Yeah, I didn't see him before, so here we go. Dave?
You're on mute, Dave.
well, you know what, maybe I'll say a few things while we get Dave connected, but as someone who spends a ton of time in the Irvington Woods, I'm super appreciative of this particular project. That marshy area is one of my favorite areas, and the fact that I can, get down there rather easily now, it's great. And as Larry brings up to the screen here, what it looked like before to what it looked like now, you can see the real improvement. And Ben, you should be super proud of all the hard work you put into this, from the design and the idea to, the finished product. It's been great. And it'll have an impact for, many, many, many years. So congratulations to you and your parents. I know how much work it is for the parents as well. So you should all be proud of this accomplishment.
Brian, as much as I'm really so appreciative to Ben, I think it would be unfair. Everything okay? So I just wanted to say Ben's parents were absolutely amazing throughout this whole process. They did everything they could to support not only Ben, but the volunteers who were out there. And I really want to make sure I tip my hat to them for their efforts through this whole project.
Thank you very much as well.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure.
Dave, are you with us, Dave? I guess Dave's having trouble connecting. So while we wait for Dave, Ben, is there anything you'd like to say to the board about your project?
Yeah, I just wanted to say this is an honor to work with, Joe, Mr. CJ, and Mr. Weisweibel. In this project, I learned a lot about how to be a leader and like how to, because a big part of it not only is getting work done, but keeping people excited about work and getting people to enjoy what they're doing. And I feel like with this project, although there was a lot of hard labor, there's a lot of excitement because of the the rapid change that was being seen through the days. And yeah, I mean, oh hey Dave. I just wanted to say thanks to everyone that helped me, and this was like a gargantuan project, and I couldn't have done it without all of you. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, Ben. It was really an honor to work with you and your family.
My pleasure.
Dave's on, by the way. We got the right Dave
Okay,
on.
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, Ben, it was a privilege working with you. It was a privilege working with your family to see this concept of these whole Eagle Scout projects. You are one of a series that have gone on, and this connection where we have family, we have other Eagle Scouts out there, and the complexity of the plan, arranging the budget. We have to tip our hats to Chet Kerr for his getting the funding through for it. but this was the culmination of a big project. We've been working for a long time to try to link all the nice stuff that's happened at the ONC for quite a while to the woods themselves and bring it down into the wetlands. And this is, we now have a sort of grand entryway, so to speak. It's a path in the woods, but it's done professionally, and it's going to be there for the next 40 or 50 years with very little maintenance. So we're proud of you. We're proud of the Scout Project in general, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. You know, one thing, and I know, Brian, you were there many years ago, one of the first cleanup days we had at the Nature Center, which was the area right behind the back door. Back then, when we started, cleaning up meant taking everything and throwing it off the end of the property, which then we never imagined would now become maybe what's going to be one of the most beautiful places in the entire trail system. Ben and his project cleaned everything. If you're facing east, everything north, and we now will go back in and finish the right side, where again we just dumped garbage, and now it's going to turn out to be just an amazing part of the Irvington Woods. So that's what I meant when I started. By one good thing in the woods has usually led to something else, and Ben has laid a great foundation for us. So I thank everyone. I know the board's got a long night tonight. If you don't have any questions, I'm good. This will be my close. Again, just thank you. Very proud of our team for accomplishing another great project. Very proud of Ben and his family. Thank you.
Thank you too. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Ben and family, and to Dave and CJ and Joe. Thanks for working with him and all the other volunteers that helped as well. It's great to have positive projects like this, and congratulations on earning the Eagle Scout. It's you know how hard that is and how rare it is, so you should be super proud, and best of luck to you.
Yeah. But you can say something.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All righty.
Yeah,
Give me a second.
thank you for all your kindness, and I appreciate it, and thank you all.
Congratulations.
Thanks, man. All right, let me,
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye. Larry cleans out the first group and moves in the next. Next up,
yeah.
the
Funny how that works.
review of the school budget by Dr. Harrison.
Just give me 1 second here. I gotta keep
Sure.
readjusting.
I should have worded that much more lengthy.
Okay.
Reminisce about last year. I think it was the first time we did this on Zoom, right?
Yeah. No, it's just, a lot of juggling. And okay. So I have Chris and Carol. Carol should be coming on. There we go. Okay.
Well,
Evening.
good evening, everyone.
How are you?
Good. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Mayor, and to the board for hosting us. Larry, as always, thank you for helping to coordinate this. And Ben and team are one tough act to follow this evening, and someone that we certainly are all proud of in the Irvington community, and of course, within the school community. That said, we're in the midst of what is yet again another atypical budget season. But we're proud of the work that we've done. And as I always try to do, I'm going to work to provide an overview.
You should have the ability to share. So
it's not letting me, Larry.
Okay, hold on.
Carol,
hold on.
Carol, do you have the ability to do it?
Okay, well, I have it set up for all panelists to be able to share.
Yeah, it's not working on. Carol, do you have it available? That you could pull it right up? It's not letting me on my end.
Let me check.
Just give me 1 second, Larry. My apologies.
No, that's okay. It's strange because I don't know any other setting.
Yeah.
Let's see. Share screen.
There we go.
Are you able to see it?
Very good.
Yep.
Thank you. So Carol, can you go to slideshow and
I
present
just
from
have
the
to get
start?
this out of the way so I can see where it is. Slideshow.
Yep. Play from the start, please.
This might be the older one. I don't know that I had the other one
No,
saved.
this is it. This is good.
I know it might not have your revised order. I don't know if I had that one quickly, but so forgive me on that.
Yep. Can you just expand the screen, Carol?
Okay, so how am I doing that? Just this screen right here, like that, right?
It's still small, but I think
It's
everyone
still
can
small?
see. Yeah, but I think
Mine,
everyone
it's
can
not
see.
small on my screen.
Okay, very good.
Like it's the full version here.
All right. So we'll jump right in, and so as not to waste the board's time. But as you know, in the school district, much like the village, we're really driven by strategic plans and objectives. And as we work through our entire budget process, which takes a good portion of the school year, we always keep in mind all of our students' needs, those that are academic, their social emotional needs. We're always keeping an eye on our facilities. And as you know, we're in the midst of a relatively significant capital project, but within the general fund, the annual budget, we spend a great deal of time and energy prioritizing those smaller construction or facilities needs to make sure that our facilities are in great shape, not only for our students and our faculty and staff, but for the broader school community. We continue to invest in our faculty and staff to ensure that they're well prepared to deliver the best education. And we go through a process where we always seek to develop a budget that's well balanced, balances our academic priorities, along with the impact that it does have on our school community. Carol? So that said, as we said, we have 6 strategic objectives that are really underpin all that we do in the district. And as we go through our budget development process, we keep each of these in mind to hold ourselves accountable. Carol? So as I said, every single decision that we've made related to the budget has really weighed on each of those items. And Carol, as we go to the next slide, you can see we've had really what is our traditional, but an important process where we started off in January by beginning to analyze data. And then from there, our public process began, which concluded back on the 20th of April with the board adopting a budget. And then next Tuesday, we will have the official budget hearing before the board meeting. And then importantly, on the 18th of May, we have the budget vote and the trustee election, which I'm sure all of our trustees for the board will come out and vote, of course. That said, our budget is really broken into 2 different categories. One is the business and operations component, and we'd like to say that this is everything that we don't typically think of when we think of education in schools. It's the back room, the back side of everything. It is really the operational side that makes all the academics possible. So on the curriculum and instruction front, this is where the magic is. This is where the student learning, the teaching and learning comes to life. And it's all of the components of the budget that really touch student experiences from classroom to extracurriculars and really envelops most of the staffing that exists within the school district. So that said, each and every year, we know there's always shifts that occur in a budget, much like in the village and the district. There's costs that grow from year to year that are natural variances that happen before we even look at new needs, new priorities, and expenditures that will inevitably surface. In the schools, we always focus on a zero-based budget and need to justify every single expenditure that we make. And we always have a couple initiatives that we're committed to that are multi-year initiatives. Importantly, one, much like the village's work, we're deeply engaged in diversity, equity, inclusion work and social emotional learning. And that work is going to be continuing in the years to come. So we need to make sure that when we're laying the foundation of the budget, that we're supporting these areas. But outside of that, we recognize our employees get raises each and every year, that there's increases in health insurance expenses, pension costs, and other contractual services that we must have to keep the district operational each and every year. So just an overview of the budget process, where it certainly has been a cumbersome one. We've seen lots of shifts in what state aid is coming into the schools, what federal monies are coming into the schools. And as a result of that, there's been some modifications to our process that are outlined here on this slide that ultimately led us to the place where the Board of Education adopted a budget on the 20th of April. So in sum, when we look at our budget this year, we started off with a foundation of about $64.5 million, which was our budget in the current fiscal year or the current school year. When we think about those push ahead increases that I referenced before, that really even before we started, and with some efficiencies identified in that budget, we're looking at increases of just about $1.4 million. This budget contains just over $400,000 worth of new considerations, which brings this total proposed budget that the voters will have the opportunity to vote on the 18th to $66,361,700. So when we think about the revenues, there's lots of shifts that are occurring this year in revenues, and we will highlight some of them. But fluctuation is occurring because of welcome increases in state aid and additional stimulus funds, in addition to the monies that we are raising from our local property taxes. So when we think of our budget revenue, as we know, like much of Westchester and many affluent communities across the state, the vast majority of the budget really sits on the shoulders of our local taxpayers. And you can see that just where 90% of the budget is funded directly through the local tax levy. Each and every year, we have to have a tax compliant budget. If we don't, we have to go, we're going what they would say over the cap. And in doing so, you would need a super majority or 60% of the vote on election day. But this again is a tax cap compliant budget, where when we look at exactly where we are, it's in compliance with the tax cap rules. And you can see that, we certainly recognize where the CPI is or inflation this year, and seeing that the overall allowable tax levy increase for this school year is this coming school year is 2.4% or $1.4 million. We're anticipating additional federal funding additional state aid that is going to come in over the series of the next 3 years. So as a part of the budget deal that was struck in Albany this year, for the first time, they are agreeing to fully fund the foundation aid formula, which is the base aid formula that funds schools. So as a result of that, for this coming fiscal year, we'll see an increase of our state aid, approximately $265,000. And then in 22, 23, and 24, we'll see over $370,000 of additional funds. This is money that will carry through the budget each and every year, and should serve as the foundation of our state aid from which future increases would be calculated. As always, we hold our breath a little bit to wait to see that if this will materialize, but we certainly are optimistic. We see both houses were behind us and the governor committed to it. So in the years to come, we should see significant aid increases. And in many ways, we would say Irvington will start to get its due in the funding, where so much more of the local tax dollars go outside of Irvington to actually see, at least formulaically, what is supposed to come back to our community actually be returned. We also know that there's a couple different rounds of stimulus funding that's going to benefit the school district. In this past year, we received about $68,000 worth of additional funds through the CARES Act. This year, there is going to be a second CARES Act that'll bring about another $205,000 worth of revenue to the school district. And the American Rescue Plan Act will bring nearly $470,000. What is very interesting about this money is that we have the opportunity to spend it over time. So in our budget workshops that we had with the Board of Education, we actually mapped out how we can utilize this money in the years to come to manage one-time expenditures that the district may face. The CARES Act money, as you can see, must be spent by September 2023, and the American Rescue Plan Act will have to be spent by September 2024. It's all going to be really like a grant-driven process where we're going to have to outline our goals and priorities, and we'll have accountability that'll flow through Albany to DC for us to be able to get the approval to spend these funds. I do want to add that 20% of the money associated with the Rescue Plan Act has to be for what they're referring to as learning loss or supplemental instruction to overcome what is seen as or believed to be the COVID gap. Again, just to reiterate that one point, this isn't something where we're going to say we're going to go hire new staff in the years to come, but look at those one-time expenditures that may be before the district. One such example that we have, besides the learning loss type programs that will be implemented in the years to come, would be the ongoing COVID testing. And here I do need to pause, and not to make our discussion any longer, but I certainly need to thank you, Larry, Joe Archino, and the entire staff, the Village, Irvington Police Department, for all the support that you've provided thus far in the year with our COVID testing program that we're running down at Scenic Hudson Park. Your partnership has really made it a really simple process on our end, but we couldn't have done it in such a fashion without your support and cooperation. So thank you. So an overview of our budget by general budget categories. Certainly when we take a look at salaries and benefits, you can see that amounts to about 73% of the budget. We always say that our budget is a true reflection of what schools are. We're a people's business. So to see such a large portion of the budget to be spent on people makes a lot of sense because aside from that, we have smaller operational costs in transportation and supporting our facilities, but realistically, the bulk of our budget is in the people that run our facilities or deliver the education. So we have, as I said earlier, over $400,000 worth of new considerations, recognizing that this was going to be a very challenging, complex budget cycle, much like last year's was. We really contained our enthusiasm and the ambition that we bring to our budget process each and every year. And so there's only a few considerations that we presented, and of course, the Board of Education was supportive of. The first two items that you see listed here are related to special education services and looking to provide some additional programs to round out the continuum of services that we provide for our students with special needs in the school district. By doing so, we're able to really provide high quality programs and specialized learning experience. Be mindful, because if we don't provide these level of programs and services for our students, we run the risk of students having to attend programs at a district at a greater cost and with not being in school with their own peers. We're looking at hiring an additional PE monitor for Main Street School because, as you know, Main Street gym stands on its own. So we want, for safety and security purposes, to have another adult with our students down there. We also investing in a data analysis platform to be able to warehouse and analyze our academic data to better assess student needs and evaluate our programs. I referenced COVID testing before that we're going to be charging to one of our federal grant monies, and we're looking at continuing that as long as necessary in similar fashion. So Larry and Joe, I hope you're smiling because you may be seeing another request from Carol and me come this fall. And then a facilities truck. One of our trucks has really exceeded its useful life. And we've leaned heavily again on the village to help us through what was a difficult winter in helping salt our parking lots and roadways because one of the trucks died and we need to replace that. And then we want to make another $100,000 investment in our facilities to continue to enhance our air circulation, as we know the critical importance not only in the COVID era, but to one's health overall. So when we look at our budget, you can see an overview. If you would like to spend more time reviewing these data points, all this information, along with all the complex backups, are posted on the website. There's a couple different links that will bring you right to all this content. But at the end of the day, and really in sum, we hold true to what we preach in the schools from the Board of Education and the administration, and making sure that we're always focused on our objectives, supporting students' needs, and really delivering what is a responsible budget, and that always make sure that we're providing for the future, that we can overcome challenges like we faced in the last 2 years, and where we see some other school districts struggling. And before this influx of additional funding, school districts were lining up the reductions that were coming their way. But we're proud to say in Irvington, because of our planning over the last decade, we're not in a place where we have to do that in years to come. So we always do an overview of our budgetary trends to see where our growth is from year to year. And looking at the estimates that we have based upon the current assessed valuation. And again, we want to recognize it's the current assessed valuation with numbers that we've gotten from Greenberg Township in recent months. But we're seeing a percent budget increase of about 2.8% and tax rate increase of just over 3.5%. There's a simple formula that you could utilize to really figure out a ballpark of where your property taxes will be in the coming year. Again, look for that most recent, the assessed value of your property, run this little formula, and you can get a sense of what your school taxes will be for the coming school year. When we think of school budget day with the vote, it's always really, really important to contemplate what would happen if a budget was defeated. And if a school district has a budget that's defeated, we have to move towards what is considered a contingency budget. And that's after 2 failed efforts at the polls, that we would be in a position where we have to revert to a budget where the tax levy is no greater than what it was in the prior fiscal year or the 2021 school year. That would result in a cut of approximately $1.4 million to our budget. And our budget truly would only increase about $384,000, which would be difficult for us to maintain the level of programs that we have in our school district that truly land us on all these lists where we're constantly being recognized to see the great programs that we're providing for our students. But, importantly, it has an impact on the entire school community. Not only would we land in a position where we ultimately would have to reduce staffing and programs that would impact student learning, but we'd be in a spot where there'd be no community use of our facilities. We could have no capital projects unless there was an outright emergency. And really what we love about the Irvington schools today would be greatly impacted as a result of that. And it would impact our overall finances looking to the future, and certainly our fiscal stress ratings, which would impact the rate at which we borrow monies in the future. Related to all of these items is the new property tax credit that is being legislated in New York State. Individuals may, and I'll say may, qualify if they have an annual income less than $250,000 and pay more than 6% of their income toward property taxes. So note that bold "and" there. If one falls into that category or those categories, they can receive a tax credit between $250 and $350. The amount of credit is on the amount of property tax above that 6%. And it's, again, subject to those prior referenced income limits. This is going to be available through 2023. You obviously have to live the bulk of the year at your residence here within the Irvington School District. And it is not something that is a direct refund on your taxes. It is a credit that you'll get when you file your income tax on tax day. So needless to say, our next official act after tonight related to the budget is the budget hearing next Tuesday and the vote on the 18th. So we really hope that everyone has the opportunity to come out and vote. We hope to see all the trustees out there to say your piece about the school district budget, to vote for the 2 trustees that are running, and to get those other registered voters in your family to be able to come out and vote. We have a voter registration coming up. Individuals that are registered can also apply to get an absentee ballot. And we are going to be voting in person at Main Street School like days of old. There's obviously going to be some, health and safety precautions that are going to be in place to ensure that, everyone is in a healthy, safe environment. But I would just encourage folks that if you have worries about COVID, that you can, this year only, make a request for an absentee ballot under the health exemptions that exist to be able to get an absentee ballot because of COVID. So please visit the district website for all of those directions and details. And also look in the next 2 weeks in your mail, because you'll be getting a detailed budget newsletter that will be delivered to every mailbox in the Irvington School District. But Mr. Mayor, that's all we have for you tonight, and certainly would be glad to field any question that you or other trustees may have.
I actually thought it was a very comprehensive presentation, so I don't have any questions, but I'm hopeful that you can start to rely on that state aid number being the state aid number and not just have it be a random number at the end of each year. Because I know how, onerous it is, creating such a budget like yours, and there's so many moving parts that to have that one part that's, significant move so much, it's just not fair when,
Mm-hmm.
They obviously can set their budgets, several years out and allow every school in the state to have some certainty. So our fingers are crossed that, as you say, it seems like this time might be different, but we've been fooled before, right? So
That is true.
hopefully that's the case. As you alluded to, your partnership with testing, I think one of the great things since you've been superintendent is I think that the schools and the village have worked together, the way they should. And even just the fact that you want to come here and present to, the village audience as well as, the school audience, they're not always overlapping. So I think it's always great that you do that. And, it's just been great, and Larry says this all the time, like working with the school when we have something we need from you and vice versa. It doesn't seem like we have to, dance around and ask each other. It's a true partnership the way, I think the way that all of our residents and taxpayers hope it would be. Hats off to you and all your staff. So
Great. Well, thank you all very much.
have a good night.
Great. Well, thank you. Take care, everyone. And again, remember to vote on the 18th.
All right, we will.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you again.
No problem.
Thank you both.
So back to the mundane now. Announcements. The only announcement I have actually is that Memorial Day will be back this year. We actually had a small Memorial Day ceremony last year, but we couldn't encourage participation by residents, which kind of didn't defeat the entire purpose, but it definitely made it even more somber than Memorial Day is supposed to be. So this year will be very similar to the Memorial Day ceremony we had 2 years ago. Which means there won't be a parade, but we will have a full ceremony at the monuments on Main Street on Memorial Day. And then we will, we will march down. It's just not quite as ceremonial. We'll march down the aqueduct and have a smaller ceremony at the monuments in Memorial Park. So, it's kind of our return towards normal. As you probably remember, we were working on expanding our Memorial Day ceremony, which was planned for last year. And then, a global pandemic stopped our big plans. So hopefully this time next year, we'll be getting ready for a much larger, celebration is not the right word, but observance of Memorial Day. So, I'm hopeful that that'll be the case for next year. And we'll have to get our Memorial Day committee back up and running. Does anybody else have any other announcements they'd like to make for tonight? Great. Correspondence, we actually received a lot of correspondence, so much so that for the first time we actually had to list it as a page 2 attachment to our agenda tonight. The vast majority was actually about Matheson Park, which we discussed at our last meeting. So we were getting, as we mentioned last meeting, we were getting more correspondence in even as the meeting was going on. So those are all here for the record. We also received multiple submissions to the North Broadway. Many of them came after the Friday deadline. So if you did send us a letter on North Broadway rezoning and you don't see it here, don't panic. We likely did receive it and it just didn't make I think it's noon on Friday cutoff, Larry.
Yes,
and it will be published in the next agenda at our next regular meeting. So there were really only 3 pieces of correspondence that weren't related to the public hearing or Matheson Park. and I'm not gonna read them all, but there was William Rush, who wants to get rid of the fire horn because it's a danger to our hearing. Beth Proper, who would like to see garbage cans returned to the parks, and I guess other places as well. And Peter Bernstein, who shared his a video of his speech that I guess is somewhat related to the rezoning discussion. But I will, I'm gonna not read all the correspondence that we had tonight because no one wants to hear me do that. So I will now open up the floor to public comment that is not about the rezoning of North Broadway. So any other topics other than the public hearing? And if there isn't any other any public comment, I will move on to consent agenda. Does anyone have questions on the consent agenda? Otherwise, I will make a motion to approve it if I can have a second. I saw Mark came off mute. I think that counts. All in favor? Aye. All right. So now we will continue the public hearing to consider a local law amending the Irvington zoning code to create a multifamily office district. We're also tonight going to be reviewing we'll be looking at a new draft. That's actually kind of more of a tweaked draft from the last one, as well as reviewing the environmental assessment form. I also thought it'd be a good night, since we have 50 people in attendance, to kind of just give a little history of how we got here. This really started with the comprehensive plan. There was actually a North Broadway committee. Their recommendations in the comprehensive plan were examined by this group. We looked it up. The first public hearing was actually on May 20th, 2019. So those of you that were worried back in May of 2019 that we were rushing this through, I think hopefully those fears are abated or relieved. And I think we started with a lot of uses. We had a lot of public comment, a lot of public discussion. We eventually eliminated all the commercial uses that people were, concerned about: convention centers, restaurants, hotels, boutique hotels. And we really boiled it down to just two uses, really. One was obviously the office use that's there now, and it has been, I guess, since at least the 70s, and I think before then. So we kind of wanted to currently it's zoned to single family residential, which it obviously hasn't been used for single family residential in about 50 years at least. So we wanted to kind of update it for that and allow the office uses that have been there for so long. And then we also did look at it and said, this is a great place to potentially create multifamily housing that could be used for not just multifamily, but also our opportunity to add significant affordable housing. We have about 30 affordable housing units in Irvington right now, and that's been kind of a static number for a long time. We had just hoped to add 6 with the DiNardo project that's now stalled on on the old fee property. But we 30 units is not a lot, and we've talked for at least a decade about trying to add more. We thought that this was really an opportunity. So what we did with this zoning was, well, I think we also looked at it and said, what else the rest of that area used for? And if you go to the properties, the 2 parcels just to the north, they're both used for multifamily. So, we thought that multifamily, just down from the other multifamily really made sense. We looked at it as a real opportunity. So we did create incentives to add additional affordable units to it. But also allowed for the chance of, some market rate and also some, what we call, kind of that middle tier that, might not be affordable by the county's definition, but it's, much more affordable than the average unit that you're going to find in Irvington, especially that would be built now in Irvington. And that's really, it's been almost 2 years exactly since we started talking about this. We've changed it quite a bit, but I think the one thing we've been steadfast in is that we thought that multifamily would be an excellent use for this area. And we also thought that, incentivizing more affordable was something, and what we call kind of market rate is something that we've all felt very strongly about, since the beginning. We all felt different amounts of love for ideas like restaurants and boutique hotels and convention centers and things. But, people did say this, it is a residential neighborhood. You don't necessarily want a restaurant that's going to be there at midnight, cleaning up and having a convention center with a wedding and the music's too loud. And we tried to figure out ways to make all those things work. And we said, you know what, let's just really focus on the multifamily housing. And that's kind of where we are. So I'd love to hear some of my other trustees speak up and share your thoughts about how we got here, what we're doing, where we're going. And then I figure what we can do is have Mary Ann, kind of go over the changes. There aren't that many, but we can go over the changes to the law. And then we can look at the environmental assessment form as well. But I want to hear from you guys, and then we'll open it up to the public for comment on all of the above. But whoever would like to speak, just go ahead.
Well, I'll jump in just for a few words. Thank you, Brian. I think you well stated a summary of that 2-year process, but I just was thinking about how long the village, the trustees and others in the village have been thinking about housing issues. I was trying to figure out how many years ago I was the liaison to the housing committee. This was before Janice was on the board. And at that time, we had Sue Smith from Hastings join us on occasion. We had Tiffany Zazula. We had Rose Noonan quite a few times. And I think there has been very serious concern about affordable housing and housing in general, the needs that you touched upon, which are the people in the middle who are squeezed. Either they're young professionals, but they might not qualify for affordable, the big A, as we often say, the big A affordable, but are not able to live in Irvington. That all those concerns and the concerns of homeowners who needed ways to be able to have allowed apartments. All of these things have been on the minds, I would say, of every trustee over the last, I'm going to say 10 years at least. So that's kind of extends the concern that we've had. And obviously we tried to get those fee, I think as you said, I think it was 6, and they are stalled, but that was a very serious effort. And we were working as hard as we could to get those to extend that in our village. So I would say that in this whole effort, at the moment, I feel that of all this work for 2 years, I think we're at a pretty good place with what's been on the table. I know Mary Ann will talk about some other tweaks, and I'm not saying that it can't be tweaked, but at the moment, I feel we've done a good job with open space, preserving that big meadow that we all love when we drive into Irvington. That was high on the list of the comprehensive plan as well. We've done an important step in character of Irvington in terms of the historic preservation that we've considered in this current version. We've also talked about the needs of seniors in this as well. Everybody probably knows somebody who said, I want to stay here in Irvington. I've lived here my working life. And you know what? I can't find a place. I can't do a 4th floor walk up. I can't do a lot of things. And I need certain amenities, but I want to stay here and I can't. So I'd say we'd had a serious discussion about all these needs, and affordable housing and diversity has been high on our list for all these years. And right now I feel like that serious effort has produced a pretty good result. So I'm certainly, we keep listening until the very last minute, and we certainly may hear something that says, gee, we need to make some other changes. But right now I feel quite comfortable with where we are. Thanks.
Well, Connie, I think that was an excellent overview. Brian, yours as well. I think, some thanks to Mary Ann for helping us to devise something that I think has a lot of flexibility in allowing different types of development to happen within the area. I particularly like the idea of trying to find this missing middle area. We are not precluding in any way, capital A affordable development from happening. But I think that there really is this need, and I think we're fairly unique in finding some way of zoning and including this area, this level of affordability within our development. I think we've taken a long time, and I think we forget, how long we worked on a lot of the more basic things, on traffic control, on giving the planning board a lot of control over appearance of these buildings. And I think people forget about that, and it's all in there. I would like to see some additional mention of environmental issues and environmental construction. I think that's something that we can still talk about. I think there's some room for that type of discussion.
I would agree also with what Brian, Connie, and Larry have said so far. We've spent a lot of time and a great deal of energy and effort listening to many different perspectives, hearing from different experts in different parts of the development community. I was realizing that, Connie, Larry, and I have all at different points served on the housing committee or been involved with the housing committee. So this is an affordable housing is something that we came to this morning to accomplish. And I too am comfortable at this point. We still need to talk. We have things to consider, but I think we've done the work, taken the broad view, and you all know one of my favorite words is balance. I think we've balanced a lot of factors, a lot of concerns, a lot of different ideas of what is involved in a good outcome. One point I would like to add, echoing what has been said before about the need for housing for seniors, that according to the county is one of the biggest demographic growth groups. So I think this is no small deal to provide senior housing for folks who would like to stay in this community or come to this community. Thank you.
So I'm just going to make a quick comment. Something that Larry Lonke said, which I think is important to emphasize, is yes, any sort of new development should be green in focus, environmentally sound and energy efficient, et cetera. Especially when we're talking about what will be, larger buildings. They're not single family homes, so they will be multifamily units. It's really important to get the building systems correct. And one thing I am concerned about is that there's been a lot of mention about LEED certification. And, I have not been following LEED now for maybe the last 4 years or so, but it did offer a framework at one point that was quite expansive. It was there was certainly a menu aspect to it. You could get certain kinds of points for certain kinds of activity, but it also required people trained specifically in LEED and required sort of a management overhead to make it happen. There was a true cost to it, certification, well beyond the material cost of making an energy efficient building. Now, I know that recently, or in the last few years, there have been some adjustments to LEED certification that tends to look at a slightly larger picture and perhaps reduces the management overhead. I'm not really that familiar with that at this point and would love to hear more about it from folks who are practicing architects who are LEED certified. But there's also something that we know and have talked about in the village, which is the New York State Green Energy Stretch Code. And the thing about that is, from everything that we've heard, is that it basically, as it comes online, it basically provides the vast majority of the kinds of energy management, building management, envelope solutions that one would want to ensure a truly green building. without the overhead of a LEED certification process. In fact, it's sort of becomes built into a standard building inspection, building approval, permit process, and planning board review process. So I'm sort of leaning more in that direction, trying to do things that allow us to get where we want to get to in terms of the environmental factors, but also doesn't place such a heavy overhead on developers in order to be in a position where they can satisfy the needs that we would like to see satisfied. So anyways, that's my 2 bits about why I think that we should probably stick with the state process and assume that it's all going to be in place in the next year. And we'll hear more from Ed, I'm sure, about this and become better educated on the timeline of availability. So that's about it.
I think the only thing I'll add that I didn't include in mine was that one of the other goals we were trying to have here is to have this be economically viable property as well. When the large white house at the top, or the white building at the top of the Carafiello property was sold, 3 of the 4 potential buyers, as I understand it, were potentially religious schools that wouldn't obviously pay any taxes at all. And if you don't have to pay taxes, it makes the buildings a lot cheaper. So we were a little bit concerned that those properties, if it was just office, say, would not necessarily be economically viable in the long term. So that was another goal of this that I forgot to mention when I was giving my little overview. Great. So you're going to have all of our little personal statements, and Mary Ann, you want to give us kind of an overview of the things that were changed since the last draft?
Yeah. I won't give just the tiny word changes, but they're mostly in the nature of tweaks, because I think at the last public hearing we did have as the principal use multi-family housing and senior housing, along with the density bonus for moderate income housing. All right, what this draft does is it eliminates, some of these suggestions came from the correspondence, some came from the board, some just came from me. And one was to eliminate the definition of medical office large practice. That was kind of a leftover because it's not a permitted use anymore. To the list of purposes, I added encourages the preservation of historic structures. Not that substantively that was a change. It's always been in there that you would get that if you have a historic building, it won't count in your coverage or FAR. So that's an incentive to keep it, but it was never stated as a purpose. And I think that's actually important. So that was added to the purposes section. On the coverage regulations, there was one clarification, because kind of the definition of building in the building code is really non-intuitive. It's any combination of materials on the ground. So it could be a patio, driveway. So it's kind of hard to define coverage. So that's why it says that the buildings don't include driveways, parking areas, walkways, retaining walls, patios. And there's one percentage for building coverage, and that's 20%. And then another 10% lot coverage, and the lot coverage would include those kinds of things like driveways, parking areas, walkways. All right, then I think this might have been something we discussed at the last meeting. One of the property owners raised the point, or maybe it was one of the developers raised the point that, okay, so you're giving a density bonus, but that doesn't get you very far if the building can't be any bigger. So we added a provision that if the building is developed with the maximum number of moderate income units, there could be an additional 5% of coverage. People say, which coverage? Well, if you have 5% more building coverage, then there's 5% more lot coverage. But if you want to clarify, so it says building and lot coverage. And then in addition, so that would mean let's say there's not, you could have building coverage of 20% and then 25% for your moderate income bonus. Okay. In addition, the Board of Trustees can permit additional coverage of up to 10% if it determines that the proposed development would further an important benefit, such as the provision of affordable housing beyond the village code requirements or the provision of a sidewalk. But if this additional coverage is permitted for the moderate income units, the maximum additional coverage permitted by this would be 5%. So it could ever be more than, the most it could be more than 20% is, most it could be is 30% building coverage, 40% other coverage. Okay, and then a similar change was made for the FAR, that you could have an extra 0.05 FAR if you build the maximum number of moderate income units. You can get an extra 0.10 if you provide something of value to the village, but if you get the other bonus, you only get 5% for that. So your only bonus would be 10%. So your maximum FAR would be 0.4. Then a couple of times there were references to buildings that the Architectural Review Board determines to be of local historic significance. We added to that any local landmark. So if somebody went to the trouble of getting building locally landmarked, they don't then have to go back to the ARB to have it to be declared of significant historic significance. That was a change Connie asked for. All right, and then I guess maybe this was the biggest change. The board will always had what when you're determining what's a moderate income unit, whether it should be affordable to a household income, whether it should be 80%, 100%, 120%, and what we decided on, what the board decided on, was a moderate income unit for purchase unit. Is eligible for somebody whose income doesn't exceed 100% of the area median income for sale, and 80% for rental. So I think the last draft we were at 120 for sale and 100 for rental, and there was a lot of comments on that, particularly from the housing committee. So board decided to lower it to 180. And I think that's it. Let me see, let me just go to the end here. Yeah, those were the only changes. So they were important changes, but not huge changes. But the other thing we have to do, because I know, and we've gone through the environmental assessment form a couple times before when we thought we were coming to the end and that we'd be ready to vote. But this time it looks like we actually may be coming to the end, and there've been some changes, so we should go through it. Now, you may be wondering why there were only 4 pages of the part 1 there. And that's because if you go to the question on page, I think it's 2, yeah, it says, is this just only require the legislative adoption of a local law? And if so, skip to the end. Okay, so these first 4 pages are just a description of the project, so we don't really have to go through them, but we'll go to the part 2, and we're not going to answer for final today, but what I'd like to do in going through this is to identify what we might need studies on, what we might need before you can, some things it's very clear you answer no. You'll see as we go through it. Some of the stuff is very clear, you answer no, but some of them it's not so clear, and you may want to say, well, I want you, you should look into this, you should look into this. So, okay, so so we don't have to read all the little boxes, but just what's on each page, there's a number one, then a number two. So let's do, the number one on this is impact on land. The proposed action may involve construction of a physical alteration of the land surface of the proposed site. Well, of course it will. If they're going to build, there's going to be some more, but you're not really going to know much, be able to answer much more than this until you actually have a project. So remember, anybody who comes in with a particular project is going to have to go through SECR and is going to have to go through the form. So this question doesn't really make any sense at this point because you have no idea what the impact on the lands would be. Although if you look at the kinds of things they're talking about, well, I guess the one that could be relevant is the proposed action may involve constructions on slopes of 15% or greater. That's possible, but anyway, but that one I think we're just kind of put off because it's going to, but we're not going to know what it is until this particular project. Okay. Number two is easier. And Larry, the next page. Yeah, impact on geological features. There aren't any geological features in these properties, so we can skip that one. Same thing with 3, impacts on surface water. There's no rivers, water, wetlands on these properties. So 3, we can you can just answer that no. The next one, groundwater, that really refers to wells. There are no wells, so that's irrelevant. That would be no. Remember, this is a form for statewide, so it would have impact other places, but not here. Okay, then 5, Larry, go up a little bit to 5. Impact on flooding. None of this is in the floodplain, so that would also be a no. If at any point you guys say, hey, think I'm wrong, just
well, we know that there's flooding problems right down the street along North Broadway, but not right.
You're not in these. In addition to which, that's actually one thing that we could almost always answer no on, because under our code, any new development, you have to keep all of the water on site. You can't let it flow off site. So, right. You can almost all, even if it were going to have impact on flooding, it wouldn't. Okay, impacts on air, and you can see this is talking about air, about pollution stuff, and it's not. And if you look at the indications on the questions under it, this isn't close to any of those limits. So that one you could answer no. Impacts on plants and animals, that the proposed action may result in a loss of flora or fauna. I don't think there's any, real wildlife there. I guess you could say there could be a little bit more development, but, so that could be somewhat less green stuff. But I mean, you can answer that later. I don't know whether if there is an impact, it would probably be small, but I don't think there's any need to do any study there. There's nothing sort of.
No, and all of it would have to be taken care of during the planning board review of a
right.
Site plan.
Okay, next page, Larry.
Before we move on for 1 second, Marianne, I meant to mention this earlier. And maybe you can do a better job about the difference between zoning and a project, proposed project. I can do it in the layman's terms, but I think there was a lot of confusion. At least I saw some on Facebook about, I heard there's a proposal for a building, and that's not what's happening right now. We're proposing zoning.
We're proposing the zoning, but it's not irrelevant to look ahead to.
No, not for this part of the exercise, but I just want people to know that there isn't a proposal. We don't own the land.
Yeah.
We're not coming up with, something we want to build there. We're coming up with zoning that could potentially allow different uses.
Right. So you do have to look at it, but more in a generic sense.
Correct.
And I think, we want to. Anybody who comes in, Brian, who's got an actual proposal is going to have to go through this same process. And at that point, they'll know the details.
Correct. That's why, I just want people to know that every time we kind of have something like this with zoning, people assume that there's a, a developer in waiting or there's a project before us. One of our other goals that none of us mentioned was we wanted to try to do the zoning in a vacuum. So there wasn't a developer that had proposed something.
Right.
So we could come up with what we thought was, the best use for this property. And then hopefully a developer would come in and agree with us that it was a good use and, come up with within our, parameters to build something that, we've come together and decided is, worthwhile building there. So I just wanted to frame that before we went on further. I think people,
Yeah,
a lot of people were saying, when are they going to start construction? And I saw a lot of kind of misinformation. There's no development plan for these sites right now. One of them is for sale. I will add that, but there are no plans. There are no drawings. There's nothing proposed. There's some allowable. We've come up with formulas to figure out how many units could potentially be built if everything went well. They jumped through all of our hoops with historical building preservation and affordable, additional affordable units and things like that. But there are no proposals right now for those of you that haven't been following this. I think sometimes we forget that everyone has been watching this for the last 2 years or even the last 2 months. So I just wanted to frame it that way, Marianne. Thank you.
Okay, then the next one is nine, Larry, because eight is agricultural resources, which is irrelevant in Irvington. Okay, 9 is aesthetic resources. The land use of the proposed action is obviously different from or in sharp contrast to current land use patterns between the proposed project and a scenic or aesthetic resource. I suppose the easy answer to that is no. Like Brian said, you've got housing on the other side. But even though this doesn't address it, I think the board has looked at what is it going to look like compared to what it looks like now. I mean, exactly because there's no proposal, but what's the worst case scenario? Given the setbacks and as big a building they could build, what's the worst case scenario? And you had some depictions, some pretty rough depictions from AKRF, and then you got some Peter Buderi submitted some I thought quite helpful schematics, and I think you got some more in one of your correspondence today from some of the people on Strawberry Lane. So I think the board has those things to look at, and then when we go through this thing for good, you could decide whether you think that those impacts are whether they're no impacts or whether they're small impacts. Okay, so is there anything else you think you need on that? I think right now you've got stuff to work with. Is everybody comfortable with what you've already seen? Again, remember, and it's all hypothetical, and what you've looked at is the worst case scenario. That's not to say it's going to look like that, but that's as big as they could get. Okay. The impact on historic and archaeological resources. Well, I don't think we need anything more on that. We know what's there, and I think you'll be able to answer that. Remember, again, mainly right now, we're trying to figure out, and if anything, that the impact is going to be positive, because right now, anybody could come in and tear down all those, tear down the stone buildings on the big White House site, or tear down the mansion on the Maxon site. But this zoning has incentives to maintain those buildings. Okay, then 11. That the proposed action will result in a loss of recreational opportunities or a reduction of an open space resource. And that would have to be no, because it's not. And what you've got now is you're requiring bigger setbacks. If there's open space, it's along Broadway, and this law has a much bigger setback than the current law does. The impact on critical environmental areas. Well, we have to answer that. Yes, because it's in the Hudson River CEA, the whole village is, but this isn't going to have any impact on that. Okay. now we're getting to things we might need. Okay, 13, the impact on transportation. We've done just sort of a rough, analysis of traffic, but I have asked AKRF now to look at the latest zoning we've got, and to have their traffic person look at what the traffic impacts are, and with the worst case, whether it could be mitigated, whether those, because if he looks and says you're going to get this much, it's impossible to mitigate. Well, that's a problem. So I mean, any earlier versions, which aren't a lot different, they didn't think there were issues, but this is significantly different from some of the previous proposals. So they're looking at that, and so you'll have their traffic study probably within the next week. I thought we were going to have it by Friday, but so does that works for everybody? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's an important one, so.
Yeah. So it's not like people have said you're just relying on the language in the code that says whatever use at the time it comes in, you have to show that use isn't going to have any significant impacts with whatever mitigation you put in. But there's no point coming up with zoning that is not going to work, because then it's not meaningful zoning, so. All right, the impact on energy. That's one of those things that'll have to be, when a project comes in, you're going to have to consider that. Impact on noise, odor, and light. Probably the only one that there could be would be with the, I mean, if you still had convention centers or restaurants in there, there could be a noise issue, but you're just talking about residential use. And I doubt on the outdoor lighting, they're very specific provisions that prevent any light trespass, and it has to be all dark sky compliant and stuff. So my guess is that they're not going to be impacts there. Impact on, next page, Larry. Impact on human health, that's not relevant. It's about human health from exposure to new or existing sources of contaminants. You're not going to get that from any of those uses. Okay, next one's consistency with the community plan. Well, this is consistent. It was recommended by the latest plan. And then the last one, 18, consistency with community character. Now, this is one where the questions underneath don't exactly go with community character. So I think you should look at them like, well, A is not, but the proposed action may create a demand for additional community services like schools, police, and fire. Okay, we also did a rough school study, but I asked AKRF to do a more precise school study now based on what the latest zoning is. Well, not more precise, just based on the latest study. Actually, the one we did was really quite precise, but and then on the police and fire, and Larry has reached out to the police department and the fire department about if we've we've asked them the worst case scenario. If there are so many more units, do you have the staff to take care of it?
I mean, I think the good thing too is that the height of the building is still 35 feet. It's not like we've created high rises or something.
Right,
It's the same thing as everywhere else. So it's not like, you need the new
different
ladder truck.
equipment or something.
Exactly right.
Yeah. And that's it. So I don't know. I mean, the reason I think I wanted to go through this with you is because, I would, if anybody in the public also has comments on things they think should be looked at that we haven't already looked at, mention that. Because the public hearing is on the new version of the local law and on the environmental assessment form. Not that you have to have a public hearing on the secret form, but it would be good to hear whether anybody else has any thoughts on it. Does board have any questions?
I
Most
think one
question,
thing,
but it's an interesting one that the proposed action C may displace affordable or low-income housing.
Yeah,
Yeah, right. Just ironic a bit.
yeah.
and I believe that there's also, and if you mentioned this, I apologize, but I think there's also like a tax comparison study that's being.
Oh, yeah, you know what, Brian, that's not part of SECR.
No,
But I know people have asked it, will it end up increasing taxes? So Larry could figure that out once he knows what kind of the expected rates, the tax rates the prices of the senior housing and prices of multifamily housing would be. And so I've asked them to look into that. What's the market rate prices for these things in a community like Irvington? And so once they get those numbers, Larry can calculate what the tax impacts would be.
okay. So if the board has any other questions, otherwise we can open it up to the public. As you probably guessed, if you're here for a vote tonight, you're going to be disappointed because we still have some work to do, but I just thought I'd throw that out there now. But I do see we have some hands up, Larry. Looks like Jonathan Casilli was first.
Yep. How you doing? Thanks for hearing me out here during
Sure.
COVID and everything. Hope everybody stays safe and stays healthy.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah. So I live on 75 North Broadway, right across from the area we're talking about. And I just found out about it probably about 2 weeks ago. It's kind of been a shock to me. So just kind of got into reviewing a bit about what information is out there, and just got me pretty concerned with the direction everything was heading. So I did a little bit more research, and thanks for all the info on this Zoom. It's very helpful to get the mindset where
one thing I
everyone
didn't
here is
mention,
at.
Jonathan, and this doesn't pertain just to you, it's everybody, but if we could try to keep it, we have a 3-minute limit on public comment. If it goes over 3 minutes, and I'll start yours over, Jonathan.
Thank you.
If you go over 3 minutes, you can always talk again at the end, but we want to give everyone a chance to talk at least first. So I forgot to give that, so you can start now.
Okay, thanks for the restart. So just a little concerned about a bit of the size of it with that much density, any sort of density really going over there. Just concerned. I don't know much about what's gonna happen there, just like you guys don't know. But I guess that my number one thought would be, I work in real estate development, and basically one of the things we do when we go into projects is we try to get all the knowledge that we can about that area, everything about how we could potentially build something, just have all the options. And so when we scrolled through that list there, like I could count a few things that I thought that would be worth it, and there's some things that are not, for sure. But I feel like we owe it to ourselves to just be on the right side of that idea, just to know what's going to be coming down the pike. Because for me, the number one thing, and I'll wrap it up very soon, is when you impact water as it travels downhill, which it's uphill and I'm downhill and people are below me as well, like that is a pretty drastic thing where we're getting very, very strong storms now, surge storms. That should definitely be considered and not left out of a check mark research, that we have an opportunity to make someone look at that and then put their name on that recommendation. We should do that. We should definitely do that. And so thank you very much for the time.
I was on mute. Thanks for coming out, even if it's virtually. We appreciate you sharing your voice, Jonathan. Next up is a phone number, 631.
Phone number, oh, they're off now.
Looks like they hung up.
Yep. Hold on.
Okay, Earl. Hello, Earl.
Hi there, everyone.
Hi, Errol.
Hey, Earl.
Thank you very much for all the efforts you've made for the historic preservation of that district. I just had a question. Marianne had mentioned it. I've looked at the draft around the ARB's review of any local landmarks. I needed to just ask a question for clarification. Would a property need to have gone through the process of nomination and approval for designation as a local landmark as is laid out in the local landmark law? Or can it simply be an historic building that reflects the historic character of the village? You know, as we drive along that corridor, there are 19th century buildings that do reflect our historic heritage,
Yeah,
architecture.
no, that was the intention, so that, if you, for instance, the stone buildings on the White property, yeah, those aren't landmarked, and they're probably not likely to be landmarked, but, I mean, they would get if they filed, but the owner may not want to. But
Right.
if they want to keep those up, they would have to go to the ARB and get a ruling that it's architecturally significant or historically significant. And
All right.
then,
So
yeah.
in the meantime, even after the zoning is approved, you know, some of them could become local landmarks through
Yes.
through the official process.
Yeah, right.
But I'm assuming that the ARB would have some discretionary authority through their review process to determine whether it represents the historic character of Irvington or not, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Tyler Palmer.
Good evening, all. Can you hear me?
We can. Yep.
Right. You can't see my purple tie, but I'm telling you, it's there. Good evening, Mayor, members of the board.
Okay.
Taylor Palmer. Good. Thank you, and yourselves. Taylor Palmer with the law firm of Cuddy and Fader. We are here on behalf of the owners of the Maxon property, as you're all familiar. I am joined again by David Smith of Planning and Development Advisors, and we are joined by the owners of the Maxon property who are on in the Zoom with us this evening. As you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, we did make a supplemental submission to your board dated April 29th. Which followed our April 2nd submission with Mr. Smith's correspondence, and then the details we discussed, as you're all familiar, at the April 14th work session. I'm going to say it twice, just because it's one of those drive it home. But after more than 2 years, we do not have any further comments regarding the local law in its current form. And that, just for clarification, that's the law dated April 15th. Again, we do not have further comments regarding that local law. The village, as the mayor mentioned and the board discussed this evening, has been engaged in the process for well over 2 years. And now we realize the draft of was different than how long the board has considered this application, because it's been publicly heard for 2 years. But indeed, the process goes well beyond those 2 years of formal zoning review, dating back to your comprehensive plan review, as mentioned. You know, as the mayor mentioned this evening, some of those drafts, and including the comprehensive plan itself, contemplated uses like boutique hotels, assisted living facilities, restaurants, and other uses. And in my son's 14-month lifetime, the properties comprising the North Broadway mixed-use district have been reduced down to 3. And the Maxon property is 1/3 of those properties involved therein. So again, the board made excellent points this evening regarding the extensive public input that has gone into this draft law, which has really evolved in some ways, again, some ways that our property owners don't approve of, but in other ways they are certainly supportive of, as it relates to the ability, and most important part, to create a feasible development, or more importantly, an adaptive reuse of the properties that really considers the mechanisms that the board and the village are encouraging that would maintain, for example, certain historic buildings or other very large setbacks and of course, keeping this property and those in the district on the tax rolls. So while these considerations are being really considered for our clients and two other properties, we did also have, and I know, Marion, you were reviewing the EAF, our clients and their consultants also submitted supportive graphics and designs and renderings to help the board understand some conceptual developments for the site. So we did put those in the record.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Taylor, yeah.
No.
Didn't mean to overlook them. They were very
right.
helpful.
Mr. Smith is here, so that one was for Dave and Susan Jane Chill, our
Yeah,
consultants
Susan
that
did
put
them,
it in.
yeah.
Yes. So to conclude, I know I have my 3 minutes and I do speak quickly, so I could probably go, it probably sounds like I've been on for 10. But from the village's comprehensive planning review to the years of public hearings and of course the graphics that were submitted and the input from the village's housing committee, we're really hopeful that the board will consider taking action on this law. And to say in the future that there can't be other changes or won't be would really be contrary to what zoning is designed to do, which is to be in furtherance of your comprehensive plan, which you're doing here by enacting this law. So as the village attorney also mentioned, the projects that will come in this district will be subject to their own seeker review and these regulations you're designing. So this is by no means a done process. The whole idea is to create mechanisms to be able to create these tax generating uses that are consistent with this district. And while, again, we're supportive of the additional goals outlined in the Housing Committee's details, any further delay is really only negatively impacting our abilities the ability of our clients to develop or market their property for an economically viable use, and certainly to keep these properties on the tax rolls. So we appreciate your time, and we look forward to the board hopefully considering a adoption of a negative declaration for seeker and the ability to hopefully move to a vote on this law very soon. Thank you all for your time this evening. It's been a pleasure.
I gave you an extra minute because of your perfect attendance at these meetings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
All right, have a good night. Chet, Kerr?
Good evening. I am speaking as a member of the Housing Committee. I know you've gotten a lot of correspondence, but I just want to make sure that you have had a chance to look at the Housing Committee's April 30th, 2021, where, and I know Marianne went through some language changes, but there were a couple of places where we had questions about some specific things and a couple suggestions. And I won't go through them, but unless you want me to, but I think they're pretty clear. And I would just make sure that I'd ask the board to consider those as you make final tweaks to the law, if that's what your plan is. Thank you.
Thank you, Chet. Thanks to the Housing Committee. That was only 36 seconds. Laura McSpadden.
Hi, my name is Laura McSpadden. I live down on Buckout Street in the Half Moon Cooperative. I'm part of that missing middle that folks are trying to address in this development. And I wanted to say, I really feel like that's the wrong focus for this development. This is an unprecedented opportunity for our town to address the lack of economic and racial diversity in our town and to address zoning in a way that would facilitate and encourage truly affordable housing for people making a much lower percentage of the area median income. As I understand it, that middle moderate income, as you've defined it, would be $125,000 a year. And to me, that will not address the history of racist policies and practices that have made our town look the way it looks. And for me and for a lot of people who moved here from more diverse places, that was a source of hesitation moving here. Did I want to raise my kids in a town that is this not racially and economically diverse? And it's something that I continue to struggle with. And I really wish that what I were hearing tonight were the board talking about explicit policies that would move us in that direction. And that's not what I'm hearing. I don't think 10% affordable units of a large multifamily development is going to get us there. And I think you all know that. So I would really encourage the board to take more time on this issue. I'm glad to hear the vote is not happening tonight, but to take more time to study the issue, to hire a consultant, perhaps as Dobbs Ferry has done, to look at how we can really try to tackle this issue in a more direct way than this proposal does. Thanks.
Thank you. I will say that to me, the most important thing isn't, I mean, the zoning allows us to have affordable development here. To me, the most important next step is that this board, this 5-person board, is fully committed to supporting that. And it goes well beyond zoning. And we've actually looked at Dobbs Ferry zoning and we didn't think it was particularly helpful. We've looked at a couple others, but we didn't find any that really had a magic bullet. You can't really, we haven't found a way anyway. And we've talked to a lot of experts, including Mary Ann, who's, who other people would call as their expert, that there isn't a magic bullet to say that something's going to be all affordable. It's not done through zoning. It's done through the hard work after the zoning is passed to meet with potential developers, to tell them that Irvington is a place. Right now, people think Irvington's a place where affordable housing can't happen, almost regardless of zoning. I've actually had an affordable housing developer tell me that, and he said that this was the first project he's looked at in, I think, 40 years in Irvington that's affordable because, the change in, frankly, people like you who are saying what you're saying and not just saying, I don't want affordable housing and thinking that affordable housing equals, Section 8 high rises. And I think that there's a lot of misinformation kind of on both sides of the debate, frankly, that, that there's a magic silver bullet of zoning that can make this happen when it's really going to be the hard work that happens after this. That's why I'm glad we have such a robust housing, committee that is going to be willing to work with the board. We were talking tonight earlier about, Larry Lonke and I think Larry Schaffler were talking about, the best way to do that. Is it by talking to our housing committee and Larry Lonke is the liaison to the housing committee? Do we, adopt a resolution that, almost like a welcoming affordable housing resolution, but we're going to work with our affordable housing committee on that as the best way to try to make those, what we want to happen, because it's not all through zoning, at least not what we've seen, but thank you for your comments and we certainly appreciate them. Boris Rubenstein.
My name is. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to mute yourself. I'm sorry, we have technical problems here. Why don't you have someone else and I'll be back in a minute.
No problem. Larry, do you want to try to go to that phone number again that tried before?
Okay. Yes, please.
Mr. or Mrs. 914-631.
Yeah, great. The caller ending in 3607. There you go.
Are you there?
Larry?
Yes, there you go. You're on.
Yes. My name is Wayne Crosby. I live at North Buckout Street here in the village of Irvington, and I've lived in Irvington for 38 years. In that period of time, I have really rarely been moved to get involved in local politics. One reason for that is I have total confidence that Brian Smith will be able to make the right decisions on this. When I first heard about the current rezoning proposal and what it would do to our Broadway area, my first reaction was disbelief. Genuine disbelief that the village would voluntarily do this to itself with apartment buildings on this tremendous scale. I thought Brian would never let this happen. I said, nothing this important happens in Irvington without a strong consensus. So when this letter came my way, I signed it, and I asked for a copy. A couple of days later, I stood in my front yard on North Buckout Street and asked my neighbors to sign it. And a few days after that, I put out a table. And within the course of a week, I got 105 signatures on people that felt the same way that I do, that this is just too much development for the village, for parking, for the future. It's a slippery slope we're starting down when we change the zoning regulations. I'm not here to tell you what's in this letter. The letter speaks for itself. Instead, I'm here to tell you what virtually everyone I spoke with over the course of the last 2 weeks had the same reaction as I did. Really, disbelief. I'm here to tell you that there is a consensus on the current proposal, and that it's a bad idea. And I'm here to say that if you think the 105 of us that signed this petition and letter don't see the big picture, you're wrong. We've seen the big picture. It's on pages 25 and 26 of the materials that we presented for this meeting. Anyone listening to this meeting who doesn't know what I'm talking about should look at that packet of before and after pictures and images, again on pages 25 and 26 of that packet. I'm also here to give you some friendly advice. Make it easy on yourself. Hire a professional planner, not just a consultant on standby, but a real municipal planner who can come in here and find the best solution for Irvington, not just a defensible one. There must be any number of experts out there who jump at the chance to work on a project like this. You'll find that validation by an expert will go along with generating the consensus that we all need. I'm here to respectfully ask that you hold off on this vote until you're all able to meet in person once again. I know you're eager to move forward. I understand that one of the selling points of this proposal is that it will benefit senior citizens. I am a senior citizen. I do not want to see this village change that radically in its content and its history.
Wayne,
if you really want to do something for the seniors, start by making it easier for us to participate in these meetings. I thank you.
We just went over 3 minutes, so if you could.
Oh, that's the end.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan.
Have a good night.
You too.
Jen Blair up next.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, loud and clear.
Yep.
Okay, good. I'm looking at this from an environmental viewpoint. You're not surprised at that. And I think where Marianne, in that section that Marianne said, there's no impact on flora and fauna, and it's a critical environmental area, so let's not worry about it because it won't really impact too much, except because you have to keep the water on site. But I think, because it is a critical environmental area, and there could be a positive impact on the flora and fauna. As I believe, the property is wooded at the top, and there has to be some sort of wildlife up there. I know affordable housing is important, and I have to agree with the gentleman that just spoke. It is a drastic, radical change. And I've been in this village also for about 38 years, and I've been pretty active and know a lot about the village and and I'm not opposed to change, because I know it has to change. The village changes. We have to progress with time. But I think if we let this go in the wrong direction, and once you say no to all these things, a developer can always come back to haunt you. It should be considered. You should have an environmental consultant look at it to really consider all the potential impacts. It's really important, because once you sign off on it, it's a done deal almost. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jen. Tom Thacker.
Hi, I'm just speaking as a private citizen tonight, just to let everybody know. So I'd like to suggest something actually that Brian referred to, which is that the village pass a resolution proclaiming that should an all-affordable developer wish to develop affordable housing on one or more of the subject parcels, the board would support that and would do everything in its power to assist the developer in securing the necessary permissions and funding. This would send a really clear and powerful message to the owners, who I hope are still listening tonight, and perhaps if they're not, the lawyer from Cuddy and Fader or David Smith is, it would send a really powerful message to them, particularly the owners of the Maxon property, but to all of the owners, that should they choose to enter into a sale with an all affordable developer that is contingent upon funding and approvals, they can rest assured that an all affordable developer would have the village support. And this really just goes back to something that Bill Balter told me, who's an affordable developer quite some time ago, which is that in order to get an all affordable development, you need to have the landowner be willing to sit still. And at the same time, you need to have the political will of the village board. And I think the political will of the village board would be telegraphed through passing a resolution, which it sounds like you are on your way to passing in any case. And I believe that should be done concurrently, ideally, with when the rezoning is adopted. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Zoe?
Hello, do you hear me?
We can, yep.
Oh, great. Good evening. I have lived on Strawberry Lane, in Strawberry Hill for 10 years. And there were 3 things I wanted to note specifically and bring to the board's attention. But before doing that, I wanted to invite you all come visit Strawberry Lane. During the time I've lived in Irvington, I've been surprised how few people in Irvington have actually been on Strawberry Lane. And that is for many reasons, but it is a very private road and very beautiful. And so, but the 3 things I wanted to bring to the board's attention and ask for some more study or considerations regarding are, first, Brian, you noted in the beginning that a little up north, there's higher density projects, about a half a mile up on Broadway. But this property and the properties here on Strawberry Lane are much closer to Irvington proper. And I would be concerned that this might change the density and the fabric of Irvington proper. That was issue number 1. Issue number 2, Connie, I think you spoke about historic preservation. And there are 3 properties here that I would be worried about that this zoning changes might alter for the worse. And those are the Madam Walker's house across the street, and then Strawberry Hill, the property I live in. And I think you should seriously consider the impact of this zoning change on those properties before proceeding. And last, more practical terms, as a father to 2 kids who often has to drive to Irvington School with the traffic patterns as they are on Broadway during school hours and so forth, I would worry what this zoning might do to those traffic patterns. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Glenn? How are you, Glenn?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, trustees. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for recognizing me. I've been on a few of these things and I've spoken a few times. And one of the arguments the board has made again and again on this rezoning issue is that we have to be realistic. We've been told that the development on these lots is inevitable. So we should just accept that reality and manage it the best we can. I think the first time I got up to speak on this issue before COVID, when we were all face to face, Connie was the one who told me that that it's inevitable. And I just have to say that, I signed on to that letter that Wayne was speaking about. It's the first letter in the agenda, and that the 105 people who signed the letter aren't really ready to accept that as reality. I know I'm not the only one who's moved here in large part to get away from the overdevelopment everywhere else. It only took about 15 years for the small rural town in Texas where I lived to turn into a place no better than the concentrated, overpopulated, traffic congested, pollution generating places that drove people to Texas in 2000. Y2K, don't worry, nobody died. The 105 people who signed this letter think if anyone's having trouble dealing with the reality, it's you guys. I know that might sound like an overstatement, but here's why I'm saying that. The main reason these 4 properties seem underdeveloped to you perhaps is because the surrounding land on Broadway is already overdeveloped. That's because possibly decisions made by local officials. I don't want to get into the specifics, but I think you might know what I'm talking about if you drive on Broadway and you see some peculiar structures. I think you're moving this village into territory we begin to consume what has already been built and established. In other words, the snake begins to consume its tail. So if the 67 unit apartment block goes up on the Maxon property, blocking the view of 2 of our oldest and most distinguished buildings, we're not growing, we're cannibalizing ourselves. You speak about these properties tonight, as if they're in the middle of nowhere. They're not. If you're going to cast yourselves in the role of the realist, then I think you should be ready to get into the nitty-gritty details of what this entails and what the impact will be in the future. You don't get to embrace only the facts that make you feel good and whistle past the ones that require the hard questions and real expertise. And what do I mean by that? So my question to the board tonight.
We're hitting 3 minutes.
Okay, as pointed out in our letter, is will you commit to appropriately reaching the more than dozen design requirements in the New York Law 7-704 before voting on the zoning change? So, and I just want to make sure that that we're doing the right thing. We're considering the true impact of the village on this, and please do us all a favor. Bring in professionals, not the escape artists. Thank you very much.
All right, Jennifer Friedman.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, so I've attended a number of these. I'm going to be brief. I, as a resident of Riverview Road, attended several meetings talking about setbacks and increasing setbacks to protect local property owners whose properties were abutting the properties under review. And at that time, when these discussions were underway, we were talking about hotels, we were talking about restaurants, we were talking about other kinds of businesses, and the discussion of affordable housing was actually not underway. I'm talking about, I don't know, well over a year ago. With the introduction of the discussion of affordable housing, I felt compelled to talk about how important affordable housing is for Irvington. My daughter, who is a graduating senior, has had 2 or 3 very close friends actually have to move out of Irvington. Lovely young ladies, whatever, girls, whose families couldn't afford to stay here. Broke my heart. Was really very sad. Loss to the community of folks who really should have been here, continuing to contribute as members of the community. We just simply do not have economic or racial equity in Irvington. It's just a fact. It's pretty undeniable. And I hope that whatever development is ultimately approved does respect the property of those who abut, particularly Strawberry Lane, lower down on Riverview, that the setbacks that were discussed are maintained, that the buildings are not oversized, that there is an appreciation for the fact that these are embedded in highly residential communities. But that being said, I just think it's absolutely imperative that Irvington take advantage of the opportunity to diversify the folks who are able to afford to live here. Thank you.
Thank you. Rabbi Rubenstein.
Thank you. I live on Strawberry Lane, right in front of Maxon. It is really interesting how casual you treated the whole issue of water, transportation, noise and light, as if that is not going to impact at all in the neighbors. I have to tell you, living across the street, I'm going to be impacted by noise and by light, for sure. The other thing is we are all going to be impacted by the fact that we have one lane road going from Main Street to 119 and into Tarrytown. To sit in your car for 20, 25 minutes when you just not have started your commute to work yet, I mean, it's truly asking for an impossibility. Paying these high taxes because you live where you really love to live, to do that, for that to happen. The other thing is, I think it was Mr. Taylor, the one representing the Maxon property. Oh my God, he wants so badly for this rezoning to happen. But of course, those tenants are leaving Irvington. They don't care what happens. We do. We are still living here. So I adhere to the idea of waiting for this to pass until we can meet in person. And I adhere to the idea of hiring independent assessors and planners before you even start considering this.
Well, one thing I'll say is that we do have our own independent planner that we've been using for several years now. So we have a firm that we work with the village. So we have had an independent planner the whole time. I think also some of the, our brushing off stormwater and some of those other things, we're not brushing them off at all. It was just for that particular form, we're not going to spend a lot of time on them, but they would be extensively looked at if there was ever a development. Feel free to add anything, Mary Ann.
I just want to add that since we live here 25 years, we've had 2 floods from the water coming from uphill. I'm just mentioning that because it is a problem. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I live on Riverview and I've had some major floods, even with 2 sump pumps in the basement, so I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Peter?
Yes. Good evening. Thank you for recognizing me.
Thanks for coming on.
Wanted to I thank you for letting me show those drawings and renderings at the work session. But I wanted to address some of the comments that came afterwards, which I think contained misconceptions and really some mistakes. First of all, it was said that those gray massing diagrams represented the worst possible design available. Excuse me. But actually, those were exactly the Maxon planner's own design, and which were applauded by a trustee as having enough ins and outs in the plan configuration so that they would be acceptable. The second comment that was made by Rebecca Volk and others was that it was put down as a gray mass. Well, it's a gray mass because it's a massing diagram. It's not supposed to represent the architectural detailing or the appearance of a building. It just shows the massing, which is quite large. As we know, 1.4 times the footprint of the Trent building, which is a huge, huge building, 3 times the size of what everyone calls the big white house on the adjoining property. And it's 30 feet away from the Maxon mansion and completely, not only does it crowd it, but it completely hides it. So the problem, it's not a matter of architectural elaboration, it's just a matter of the FAR, which is simply much too high. The next misconception is the idea of screening. which was suggested as a way of improving the appearance, especially from Strawberry Lane. Screening can work to obscure unsightly features such as the trash areas and parking lots if you don't want to look at a lot of cars parked on top of the hill and you think that will obscure them. But you can't make the entire building disappear by screening it with vegetation. It reminds me of that bamboo grove on the northeast corner of Riverview Road and Broadway that's like an impenetrable forest. But if you try to screen a building with thick vegetation because you don't want to see it because it's so large, the people who live there aren't going to be able to see outside. It was said that the views didn't look that bad. They didn't look much different from the existing when the views from Broadway. Well, first of all, they were taken from across on the other side of Broadway, so maybe they didn't look as bad as they would have if I had taken them, because that was more realistic where the sidewalk was. But Fred said that
we're just hitting 3 minutes, so but you can take another 30 seconds because there's no one else with their hands up.
All right, thank you. A friend just mentioned to me when she saw them, an Irvington friend, that the building will look like a massive, overwhelming structure, too large a scale to look good, and will significantly and negatively impact North Broadway traffic. The point about the building seen from the other side of Broadway is that they actually cut the horizon, they cut the cliff, and you see them against the sky. Right now, you're looking at the cliff, and that's a significant difference. And finally, Rebecca Volk said at that work session that we are trying to go against uses called for in the comprehensive plan. That's not true. All of those uses don't need a building that size. And those are my comments for tonight. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you, and thanks for your drawings and all of your hard work during this.
Okay.
Lisa?
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Smith and the Board of Trustees. I want to keep my comments brief. I wrote to you a letter to you on this subject, and I want to echo in large part what Laura McSpadden said. I also agree with what Tom Thacker said about passing a resolution in support of affordable housing. I understand that the board has spent a long time developing the zoning ordinance that's before us now, but I strongly disagree that it couldn't do more to incentivize affordable housing, which I think should be a very intentional and primary objective. I know that there was a mention of balance, but we're starting in a society and a community that is very much off balance, one that is overwhelmingly affluent and overwhelmingly white. And a balanced approach is not going to help to rectify that historical and contemporary injustice. So I think the board's approach should be intentional. I think it should be focused on socioeconomic and racial equity, and it should incentivize affordable development and not make it impossible for an affordable developer to compete. And I also want to just again underscore that I agree with Tom that the board should show its commitment to making affordable housing an intentional priority by passing a resolution of the kind that he described and Brian that you mentioned. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for coming on. Mr. Zweibel.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I got muted there.
No problem.
Thank you all for spending all this time and energy to do this. I have written a letter on behalf of myself and not my various memberships on various committees in the community. And I assume you have read that letter, but I would like to make a couple quick comments based on some of the other comments and some of the comments by the board. First of all, you have stated tonight that you're, looking to satisfy that middle ground a bit. And, I consider that middle ground to be the workforce housing in this community, the employees of the village, the employees of the school district, first-time teachers and the workers who work in all of the businesses in the community. Who pay taxes, etc. who most of whom can't afford to live here. So that's really affordable housing, the capital A affordable housing. Those people fall into that category. Now, as my background is a real estate developer and architectural planner. What I look at when I see this zoning, it allows for affordable housing, but it also allows for luxury housing. It's pretty much not precluding either. And from a developer's point of view, if you have an absolute equal ground between affordable housing and luxury housing in a community like Irvington, luxury housing prevails. Jan Blair made the statement that the village is changing. Yes, it is changing. If you look at the housing survey of Westchester, Irvington has the, hidden in those numbers, has the significantly decreased the number of Black residents of this community, such that we are now of all communities in Westchester, villages, towns, etc., both by number and by percentage, we have the fewest Black people living in this community. So we are the most ivory tower of this community. And that's been determined by our zoning because of our high percentage of single family zoning and the gentrification that has occurred in this village. All of those wonderful houses up and down Main Street used to be affordable. But as each one gets sold, it gets gentrified and the price goes up. So I would encourage that you look at this zoning and realize that if you're not creating a incentive for something that is affordable to what you are calling the middle ground or affordable in general, that basically the developer is going to make more money doing a luxury condominium up there or luxury housing. And that's what's happened all around Westchester where that's allowed.
We're over 3 minutes now, so we try to wrap it up.
Okay, that's it. The other quick thing is, Mark, all affordable housing in Westchester in the last 5 years has been built to LEED standards. And by not demanding LEED standards, basically you are favoring a market rate developer to not be able to do that. He doesn't have to do it, so he doesn't do it. And it's going to be less of a building than affordable housing because affordable housing is now not required, but in order for them to get their funding, they sort of have to do it. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Arlene?
Hi, I just want to, I also wrote a letter and I just want to echo the thoughts about intentionality and being intentional about affordable housing. I think that, as a community gets just whiter and more affluent, we actually are losing out a lot in terms of like what, not just racial diversity, but what economic diversity brings and sort of taking into account how enriched our community can be by the people who already sort of like work here, teach our children, the cops here, work in our businesses, and other people who do similar jobs in other communities. And I think if if we incentivize, just sort of agreeing with David that if you incentivize, you have the same incentives for a market rate developer and an affordable housing developer, the affordable housing developer will always lose that battle. So I think that, if the board wants to maybe zoning wants affordable housing as a real option, as something that might actually happen here, then you have to be more intentional, and you can't have the same incentives, right? You shouldn't have additional, density bonuses for a market rate developer. There are things, you should have LEED certified standards, which, also, as David said, apply to affordable housing builders. As we've learned over the last few weeks, that most market and most affordable housing developers are already building to those standards. And I think if, aside from affordable housing, if we think about sort of environmental issues in Irvington, sort of like all of us moving to greener communities, that, this development should really stress these standards. But I do want to say that one of the things that, we cannot ignore is the history of zoning and, the exclusion of, people based on race in our community. And for sure, Irvington is not unique in this, but zoning laws have often been used to do that. And I think, we need to be a little bit bold about creating incentives to undo those historical problems that are, that we face every day. And I think, I know 105 people signed that letter, but and I think people at the beginning of the call were talking about a lack of consensus around these issues. I think you will find that there are huge numbers of Irvington residents that want to live in a, socioeconomically, mixed, area, that want to see affordable housing, that want to see sort of a welcoming community that is not just welcoming in words, but welcoming because you see different people here. You see different people living here, coming to the businesses. And that's going to take bold action, and that's going to take intentionality. So,
Okay.
I,
Over 3 minutes.
my 3 minutes.
Wrap it up. Yep.
I'm done.
All right. Thank you. Kimberly.
Hi, it's Kimberly Raby, 20 Strawberry Lane. We've lived here about 6 years, and I've probably attended a lot of these meetings along the way, starting back from Brightview. My property shares two adjacent properties are up for the potential rezoning. And I guess I just want my voice heard that for my husband and I'll speak for both of us, it's really not about 67 affordable units or 67 luxury units. It's really just about the size and the density of any development that is going to be part of our small little 170-year-old neighborhood here. And I guess I would just urge everyone, to look at other options in the village around versus just focusing on this Maxon property. There's something important to all of us, but what are we all willing to give up a little bit? Are we willing to give up the local theater to repurpose that for affordable housing? Are we willing to, add units on top of our library to make that 3 stories high? I guess I just really want to make sure that, again, I don't want to get in this political battle. It's just a matter for our family about the environment that we live in, not the people that we're surrounded by. So that's all I really wanted to say publicly for our family.
Well, thanks again for you also get the perfect attendance record, even if you missed one. And you had a difficulty of having to get babysitting from, or at least most of it. So we appreciate your attendance. I think that a lot of the commercial uses that came out were directly related to, your comments and your neighbors' comments. So, we do appreciate you, speaking up at all these meetings and taking the time to come to them as well. Katerina.
Yes, good evening, everyone.
I really was not going to speak today, but which is why I brought my comments and Q&A, but at the end I decided to talk about it. So first of all, I wanted to reply to the lady from Half Moon Development who spoke about economic diversity. Well, you know, economic diversity is great when it doesn't come out from your pocket, and our children go to the same schools, yet the single family homeowners pay on average $40,000 per year in property taxes versus apartment owners pay on average $1,900 per year. So, which means that the burden of for the services that village provides and the schooling is shifted to single family homeowners. And while I'm happy to have a certain amount of economic diversity in a village, I mean, this is all great, but I'm afraid that pushing even more economic diversity on the village will drive our property taxes even higher and will take the single family home market even into even deeper decline. And I'm saying deeper decline because of the breeze already decline. And I wrote an email about it to Board of Trustees a couple of months ago. And actually, even today, I spoke with real estate agent discussing this issue because I know that houses in Irvington have been sold at loss in comparison to what when they were purchased 5-6 years ago. And I know that because I purchased my property 6 years ago. So this is one thing. Another thing about historic injustices. An absolute majority of us have nothing to do with it. We're a nation of immigrants who were and are discriminated regardless of our skin color. Being a Slavic person, being a Russian person, I know very well what I'm talking about. Hence, it's really not fair to punish us, new immigrants, for the crimes that were committed long ago by people we have no relation to. So do we really want to see Irvington to fall into downward spiral of single family homeowners selling their houses at loss and moving elsewhere? And at the end, Irvington will have decaying tax base, which will result in decaying services, such as road cleaning, schooling, and everything else. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out again. Anybody else? Dave Smith.
Good evening, Mayor. Can you hear me?
I can. How are you?
Very good. Well, thank you. Good evening to the board. I will be quick and succinct. I just wanted to sum up on behalf of Hannah Rubin and David Rubenzahl, who are clients and own the Maxon property. We appreciate the extensive effort that the board has gone through with crafting the zoning, understanding its relationship to the comprehensive plan. And we thank Mary Ann for recognizing the hard work that Susan Jane Schill did on behalf of our clients, preparing extensive graphics which indicate how potential development could be accommodated on this property. And we understand that there have been other members of the public who've done the same thing in an attempt to show how development could be accommodated. I think it's important, as Mary Ann noted, that after this process is finished, if in fact the board adopts zoning, and in fact, if there is a prospective developer that comes in, there's a whole nother process that the village will need to go through between your board and the planning board and the ARB and the historical aspects, evaluating development potential. And that relates to all of the items that were listed in that EAF in much more detail, including stormwater management, including traffic, including visuals, so that the diagrams and some of the evaluations that were prepared provide kind of an evaluation at this stage of the process. We don't have a developer, we don't have particular details, but those will get evaluated as we move forward. And I think lastly, one of the important components that we've all been considering is that the village is looking to have to get certain public benefits through private property development. And that includes the establishment of a significant buffer area along Broadway, the creation of affordable housing as part of a market rate development. And potentially even the addition of kind of this moderate income housing. And so, again, we think it's important that, as Sadie McEwen indicated, that in her presentation, density matters, size matters. And so when you're evaluating these types of issues, FAR is important, coverage is important. And I think it's also important to know that that the village, through evaluating the proposed zoning, established setbacks and guidelines which essentially force the development into a particular location on the site. And so that's kind of the guidelines that we all have, we're all working through. We appreciate your effort, and we hope that in the near future, the board would be so inclined as to move forward with the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Sarah Cox.
Okay, thank you very much for taking me, and thank you so much for hearing out everybody. I've written an address to the Board of Trustees on several occasions regarding amending the zoning code to provide truly affordable housing. And now I'm just going to ask you to hold off on the vote tonight. But Brian, you did say that you were going to. Affordable quality housing attracts teachers, cops, nurses, firefighters, and other key service providers in our community. But I'm here to talk about the fact that Irvington has a history and a long-standing reputation for being unwelcoming to families of color. Real estate covenants in numerous neighborhoods in Irvington made it clear that Black families need not apply, and this was standard practice that went on for decades and decades. So right now, we as a community should seize this moment and begin to right this wrong. More people in our community believe that doing what's best for everyone is paramount, even if it means some amount of personal sacrifice. I know we have to acknowledge that there are a few fearful folks in our community who simply see their own inconvenience as unacceptable, no matter what. So what does affordable housing have to do with what's best for everyone? It's a fact that people who live in affordable housing are more likely to succeed socially, academically, and professionally. Families can spend more energy and resources on healthcare, nutrition, education, quality daycare, and transportation. So finally, providing the option for affordable housing promotes interaction among all families, rich and poor, including white and families of color. So contrary to the point of view of the few and fearful amongst us, affordable housing strengthens communities. Let's show Westchester County that Irvington makes good neighbors to each other and to others. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Karen Schatzel?
Am I unmuted now?
You're loud and clear.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I think many people on this call have a strange idea of what affordable means. And as a resident who's been in this community for over 50 years, I just would like to remind people, when my husband and I came here in 1968 with our infant son, I think we paid $7,200 for our first apartment in Half Moon Apartments. And for us, that was a stretch. And we had to borrow $1,000 each from our families in order to buy that apartment. And when we bought our first house in 1977, I know we paid less than $80,000 for a very modest house that we never wanted to add even a garage to, because we knew it would be rezoned, and we would have, reassessed, and we would have to pay higher taxes. And at this point in my life, I'm 83. I live in Half Moon South Apartments. I'm thrilled to be here. And I live in an apartment that has one bathroom and a kitchen, which is 7.5 feet by 9.5 feet, which is perfect for an 83-year-old lady. But I have a wonderful family who lives up above me, and they have 2 children. And I don't know how they do it. Besides which, when people talk about affordable here in Half Moon, if you're paying $350,000 for an apartment and 20% is required for the down payment, either you have to have some help from your families or you have to have some wealth from some other source. And so many middle-class families now don't have that. I recognize this is all anecdotal, but families, each one, are anecdotal. So I think people who have been here in some cases for generations and have wealth and have been able to live here as things have increased have a very different idea about what affordable housing means. And I keep wondering how many of these people who are on a list serve in our volunteer ambulance corps or on the volunteer fire company or on the school board. And to what extent do they contribute to this wonderful community that so many of us love? So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Anybody else? PJ?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I hope Trustee Kehoe doesn't mind if I just direct a question to her. I certainly don't mean to put you on the spot at all. It's just that I understand that you get much of the credit for the formation of the historic district around the Main Street area. And that is something that I'm particularly grateful for because my family has had a completely ordinary, boring 4-family house off of Buckout Street for about 45 years. And reading that one paragraph in the inventory of that house actually changed things around for us. I think we were ready to dump that place and move on. And we suddenly acquired like this real pride in something that we've been working on all those years. And so we kept that house and we improved it. And it was such like a win-win, which is, you know, more or less what you expected. So thank you for that. It does bring me up to the suggestion made by the Housing Committee. And I do not agree with them on many things, but they did recommend the use of a historic inventory consultant to provide an inventory of what is left in that North Broadway corridor. We have historians and preservationists at our fingertips here. I do urge you to please consult them now, earlier in the process. I'm not sure why we need to wait for written reports. I think we all have a vague sense of what we have up there anyway. But my question, and this really is for you, Trustee Kehoe, I noticed that the Westchester County Historical Society expressed opposition to this rezoning on preservation grounds. It's letter EE in the packet. I'm just wondering if you could, how you reconcile the independent assessment of an actual preservationist when you guys seem to be promoting this as something that actually incentivizes historic preservation. Can you just square those two things for me? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to study your letter. I appreciate your comments tonight. I will take them into consideration and happy to get back to you.
Thank you.
Katerina?
Yes, hello again. So on the issue of this affordable housing, once again, which another lady has mentioned, so it looks to me that people are so concerned to build this, affordable apartments here, but they don't even think about having affordable single-family homes in this area. And the way I see it is that by pushing affordable apartment units, multifamily dwellings on Irvington, makes single-family homes less and less and less affordable. Families do not want to move into Irvington because the taxes are so high, so they move elsewhere. I don't even know, what is the property tax rate in Irvington right now? I know that it went up all the way up to 3.5% at some point. Is it down? Is it what, 3.1, 3.2? I'm not even sure, but it's still extremely high. In Scarsdale, it's 2.8%. In Rye and Bronxville, it's even lower than that. So we already are paying this insane amount of property taxes that devalue our single-family home values, which makes it makes the single-family homes less and less affordable, and families with children want to live in homes, not in the apartments, because we need more space. And I do not even understand why people look at us as we just print money. We do not, and we are a family of immigrants. We did not inherit any wealth, which lady has mentioned. So I don't even know where this idea is coming from. And once again, I spoke with the realtor just today for over an hour. We discussed all of these issues. And I just want the Board of Trustees and everyone else to see this, because I'm afraid that the things will become even worse. And that what Irvington needs is not more affordable houses, but more businesses to help us paying the bills. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Kaufman.
Hey, thank you for taking my call and for spending so much time considering this issue. I really appreciate it. It's I wanted to just say outright that I'm just so struck by the passion people feel for the village in this conversation and for their homes, and how much we love this place, and that really comes through. And it's actually very touching to me to hear that from everyone who's contributing tonight. I do feel I really would like for you to strongly consider. I think, as Lisa again said, being intentional about affordable housing. It does sound to me from learning about this issue that it's nearly impossible to get a meaningful affordability if you're not intentional, because of the cost benefit to developers. That's really been said, and I want to throw my hat in that because I feel strongly about it as well. But the other thing I wanted to add that hasn't come up much tonight is that, and I've changed on this issue in recent years, is that I really would like to see taking any kind of all senior housing off the table. I didn't used to feel that way. I used to think it was an important amenity for our village, but I've just, as I look at this and spend more time thinking about it, I feel like an all senior type of any kind of residence that is homogeneous in any way is probably by design is probably not in the spirit of what we're trying to do in the village in terms of having multi-generational housing, having people closer together with people who are different from them in a myriad ways. And it's hard to picture that an all senior housing development would really have. It seems like it would be even more difficult to integrate into the community. I'd like to see us looking at opportunities, and this is along the lines of somebody who spoke, who lives on Strawberry Lane, for creating pocket developments in the village, small, very small, not developments, but creating affordable housing that is central as we can to the village life, thinking about changing requirements like parking, that might allow for some more creative uses of small spaces within the village for all kinds of people. But in particular, I did want to make that point about senior housing, that I just think it goes against what we're trying to do, and probably I just don't think it's really a value add for us as a community. Thanks very much. I appreciate the opportunity to weigh in.
Sure. I will mention one thing. I think one of the suggestions was to build stories above the library and put affordable housing in there. Actually, 26 of our 32, or over 80% of our affordable housing, is over our library currently. So that worked out well. So it was a good idea. And I think that was what, about 30 years ago now, Larry? So
At least, yeah.
Anybody else? Arlene?
I just want to make one quick comment. I think we need to be careful, and I don't think the board is doing this, but just, this idea that that people who live in affordable housing and, sort of ascribing all these characteristics to them and how, we're supporting them. I think there's just so much ignorance about what affordable housing is. And I think that maybe, we can spend some time as a community learning more about it, right? Because as you just said, there are 26 units in the library, and those are families that live and go to school, kids that go to school with our kids, and perfectly, good neighbors contributing to this community. So I would hope that as a community, we do not stigmatize people who live in affordable housing, right? Because that's, I commend the board, because I know you guys have not been doing that, but it is hard to hear those comments and stay quiet. So thank you for letting me just say that comment.
Sure. Anybody else? I know people are anxious for the annual stormwater update Larry gives every year.
I hope not.
Katerina, one more time.
Yeah, I'm sorry to bother everyone again, but regarding the stigmatizing, this has nothing to do with any kind of stigmas. This is about our expenses that we pay for our houses and for our families. And I want that to be considered. And like I stated before, families with children refuse to move into Irvington because they seek single family houses elsewhere, because they cost less. Or let's say if the values are the same, they will pay less in taxes. And so they choose to go elsewhere. So this has nothing to do with stigma. Personally, I wouldn't care who lives next to me as long as it doesn't hit my pocket. Thank you very much.
Okay. So Larry, I think I will move on to we'll obviously keep the public hearing open, and we will move on to the presentation of the annual stormwater report for fiscal year 2020, 2021.
Okay.
We purposely didn't put this up front because everyone would have left.
No, I know. Good point. So every year, as you know, the village needs to prepare a report because we are the operator of a stormwater collection system. The federal government through the state requires us to do this. And we collect our stormwater and it dumps into the waters of the United States, which in this case is the Hudson River. So as a result, we have to report on this annually and adhere to certain standards. We're given a permit to collect this water, the stormwater. In order to continue to collect it, we need to comply with 6 minimum measures, which I'll very quickly outline for you. The report, which is attached to the agenda, is there for anyone to look at to see the details. But basically, the 6 measures are public education and outreach. Those actions include things like direct mailings, which I don't think we did too much of this year, emails related to stormwater topics, as well as postings on social media, and public events, which again, because of COVID, we didn't have any this year really to speak of. A little bit of trail cleanup and things like that. On public involvement and participation, that's the second minimum measure. We did have some limited activities up at the Nature Center and involving the trails and cleanup of the trails and cleanup in the areas around the Nature Center, which affects stormwater quality. And public involvement and participation actually includes this kind of public presentation of this report itself. More important areas of this are the next items, which is measure number 3, which is illicit discharge detection and elimination. So we monitor, there's multiple outflows of stormwater around the village, drain pipes that empty into catch basins or empty into open streams. And we monitor those locations. There's 68 of them. During this year, there were no illicit discharges detected, as was the same last year. We have had them in the past, but they're fairly infrequent, thankfully. We also monitor construction sites for stormwater control. This year, we have 2 permits that have been issued for 2 larger scale projects. Those are the only ones that permits need to be issued for. And the report contains a summary of those monitorings. We also monitor stormwater control basins and other measures that have been built over the years. So various projects that may have retention basins or other features, we monitor the maintenance of those. And in some cases, when they're not maintained properly, we make sure that they are maintained properly so that they function the way they're designed. That happens to be minimum control measure number 5. Number 6 relates to stormwater operations for the village operations. So stormwater management that we're responsible for. So it includes street sweeping, which has been on a little bit of a hiatus that'll be resuming fairly soon. Parking lot sweeping, catch basin cleaning, which is a very important one, going around the village and cleaning all of the 500 plus catch basins that we have on a regular basis. And we report on all of that in this annual report. So unless you have any questions, happy to answer them. Otherwise, this report is posted on the village website. We have a separate page devoted to stormwater and all of the annual reports, including this draft. If there's any questions, let me know.
Another fine presentation, Larry.
Did I live up to standards?
Connie, do you remember the first one we had? That was like an hour and a half and that guy gave it?
Oh, it was longer than that, I'm sure. About 80 pages too.
It was long. I mean, he went through every one, explained what every box meant, but we thank you, Larry, for summarizing it so succinctly.
All right. And we'll be doing some emails about this in the coming weeks just to make sure the community sees this.
Next is authorization to approve change orders number 11 and 12 for Matheson Park Playground renovation project. If you want to give us some details on that, Larry.
Yeah, so there are two change orders in front of you. Just give me 1 second here. Sorry, we're going through rapidly. I know it's getting late. There's 2 change orders that are being considered for Matheson Park, the construction project. And their change order number 12 is in the amount of $115,000. That change order, although it seemed obviously it's quite large, it's actually a planned project. It's kind of a separate segment of this project, which relates to the renovations of the bathroom. We were able to solicit and obtain a favorable price from the existing contractor under the existing contract. And so we're choosing to get that work done under the heading of a change order, as opposed to doing a full-blown set of specifications with competitive bid and all of that, which would be quite time-consuming, but also we are satisfied with the price. All of that's been reviewed by our architect. So that's change order number 1. Or number 12, actually. Number 13 is $35,269. That relates to specific requirements that the health department put on this project that relate to the splash pad, the water and the piping necessary for that project. The health department introduced a number of different requirements which are being worked on now, which is why the park is not open, of one of the reasons. That includes installation of a backflow prevention device, a pit with a pressure reducing valve, and all of that's being done, geared up for this week, pending your approval, of course. So this money was not anticipated, but there is funding available in the budget still. That's it.
Any questions? Yeah, the splash pad, I think it's been the one kind of hiccup in the whole, the biggest hiccup in the whole renovation.
It's been a challenge, yeah, for sure. There will be one other change order relates to some ADA improvements that are necessary related to the walkway that goes to the bathroom building. It's not small, but it's not super large. We're working through the numbers right now, but again, still the project should be fairly close to its budget.
Great. It's always good news. Next is approval. I'd like to make, authorize change order number 1112 for Madison Park Playground Renovation Project. I'll make the motion if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Carries, Larry. Approval of grant application for the Hudson River Valley Greenway.
Yeah, so this is, we're trying to jump on this fairly quickly. You're obviously working through the details of considering a installation of plaques along Main Street at each of the side streets that you're working with the Irvington Landmark Preservation Group. And this Greenway grant is due on May 7th and seems to be to fit nicely with this particular effort. It's about the right size. Seems to be in the wheelhouse of what that grant can fund. So we're going to give it a shot. Try to make an application for that. I know Trustee Kehoe has offered some assistance with embellishing the application a bit, and which we'll definitely take her up on that. What you have on the agenda is just a very, very quick draft of that, but we're going to pull it together this week and get that application in if you're so inclined.
And I believe we also said that applying for this one doesn't preclude us applying for a similar grant for the Commemorate Enslaved African project down on Bridge Street potentially. Yeah, completely. I think that's that would also be a nice fit. That project just needs to be a little bit further down its path to be able to apply for a grant for that. Okay. Any questions? Actually, I'll actually read the resolution this time. Whereas the Village of Irvington is applying to the Hudson River Valley Greenway for a grant under the Historic River Valley Greenway Planning Grant Program for a project entitled Main Street Plaque Project to be located in the Village of Irvington. And now therefore be it resolved that the governing Village Board of Trustees hereby does approve and endorse the application for a grant under the Hudson River Valley Greenway Planning Grant Program for a project known as Main Street Plaque Project and located within this community. I'll make a motion if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Great, thank you.
Next up is reports of board, standing committees, and officers. Trustee liaison reports. Let's start with Mark, as we usually do.
Thank you. I have nothing right now except to remind people that GPTF has a new website that has full of interesting and useful information.
Okay. Larry Lonke?
The bi-weekly farmers market is scheduled for this Sunday at 9 a.m. 9:30 to 1 o'clock. I've got a list from Rec. Summer camp registration begins on May 5th. It's for 3rd through 6th graders. To make your experience smoother, you're best registering on the site prior to the actual registration. Call Maureen DePauli if you have any questions or need help. Riverkeeper this past Saturday, led by Irvington High School student Morgan Balkan, cleaned the riprap and the fence lines and did a great job. Also on Saturday, another group led by Nikki Coddington C.J. Riley, Peter Strom, and Dave Zweibel. We've heard that name more than once tonight. Hiked to below the hermit's grave to cut hundreds of invasive vines. The vine work is critical and we need to keep it on a regular schedule. We will also continue to battle the barberry bush, which is taking over the woods. We introduced our new sawmill on Saturday, and Dave Zweibel and CJ made the first cuts. The mill will allow to cut felled trees and make wood to be used for tables, benches, and more. The cost for everything that went with the purchase was just under $2,000 and was donated by Chet Kerr, another name we've heard more than once tonight. He realized the value of the machine, wanted to help. Chet's an amazing supporter of all the efforts in the Woods Park. Our grant with the DEC to conduct a tree inventory in the Irvington Woods Park is underway, and we'll have our first on-site meeting on May 22nd. The O'Hara Nature Center continues to be a vital location for programs which include art, yoga, ballet, dance, Legos, and they continue to hold classes in the building. Tennis courts are in full swing, and gate attendants are on duty Friday nights through Sunday nights. Please register online for reservation. Parks are currently hosting 3 softball leagues, private rentals, Greenberg United Soccer, kickball, peewee, and t-ball baseball. We anticipate the opening of the scenic Hudson basketball court sometime during the week of May 10th. Rules governing the use will be announced soon. Food shopping for senior citizens using our bus will begin within 2 weeks, and sometime in May, we'll reopen the senior center for use. Much more info to follow on this. The potential opening of Matheson Park will hopefully be sometime in June. Park users are reminded that the launching, landing, or flying of drones over any village park is illegal. Please report drones to the Irvington Police Department. Continuing a 30-year plus tradition, the Irvington Beautification Committee hit Main Street today to plant flowers on Main Street. Also within a few weeks, the over 30 planters will be placed up and down the street. Please consider watering them if they're in front of your home or business. Just a couple more. We're still working on the Teen Summer Program, but it is still very difficult to find places that will accept groups. As soon as we have a plan, it will be announced. Our staff continues to monitor state and local data to make sure that we have the most updated information regarding COVID and the things we're able to offer to the residents and the community. We're certainly offering a lot. And lastly, we have posted 3 separate job postings for positions in the department. Job applications are available on the village website. All positions are part-time and are on an as-needed basis. Senior citizen bus driver, park ranger, and park attendant. Thank you.
Connie Kehoe.
I don't have anything tonight.
Janice Silverberg.
2 brief announcements from the fire department. The Westchester County Department of Emergency Service training facility upgrades are completed, so a burn building is available. And our department will be in an interior fire attack training beginning this week on May 4th, including the May 18th and June 1st. Also from the library, and please check the website for many more announcements, but most importantly, this Sunday, May 8th, is the Founders Day Walk from 10 to 1:30. It's an in-person event starting at the library, walking together to Lyndhurst, and this will be celebrating the life and work of Helen Gould Shepherd, who is one of the founders, and this is the 119th anniversary of the registration of the Irvington Library, and we're anticipating even bigger and better things for the 120th next year. That's it. Thank you.
Village Administrator's report.
Nothing tonight.
Village Clerk Treasurer. Village Attorney. Nothing. Public comment. Look at action items, Larry. I didn't really have anything.
No.
I will make a motion to adjourn if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all. Have a good night.